Winston is one of no less than 6 siblings who attended UCL. We think that's a record in itself. Winston graduated from UCL Faculty of Laws in 1960 and has been a solicitor in Hong Kong since 1964. He served as a member of the Town Planning Board between 1988 and 1996, and later also as a member of the Metro Planning Committee and the Lands and Buildings Advisory Committee in Hong Kong. Most importantly for the lecture this evening, he founded the Society for the Protection of the Harbour in 1995 and served as its chairman until last year. He was directly involved in the enactment of the Protection of the Harbour Ordinance and the 2 recent judicial reviews concerning the harbour reclamation. That's what you're going to hear about this evening. Winston has been an honorary lecturer of the Faculty of Laws of the University of Hong Kong since 1984 and a visiting professor of planning law in the Faculty of Laws and the Bartlett School of the Built Environment of University College London since 1995. In 2004, he was voted Legal Personality of the Year by the Asian Legal Business Awards. Winston has been a most loyal supporter and friend of the Faculty of Laws at UCL, and 2 years ago we were delighted through the generosity of the Winston Chu Foundation created in Winston's father's name to honour the memory of Winston's mother, Cissy Chu, through the naming of a student common room that you saw upstairs earlier. This is a wonderful facility of the faculty and we are greatly in Winston's debt for making that possible. We are delighted that Winston has agreed to share with us his experience of working to preserve Hong Kong Harbour. I know from my own conversations with Winston that this is a matter to which he has devoted a huge amount of personal energy and about which he speaks with great passion. I know that we're in for a treat this evening, and so please welcome Winston Chu to give the lecture.
President and Provost, my lords, professors, ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings from Hong Kong. It is being presented to you today a first-hand account of the Hong Kong experience, how the rule of law could be used to change the major policy of a government and to successfully protect the environment. Our experience may set a useful precedent whenever and wherever power is abused and the environment is endangered. Britain had ruled Hong Kong as a British colony since 1841. In 1982, the Honourable Margaret Thatcher visited Beijing and met with Chairman Deng. In their discussions regarding the future of Hong Kong, she was informed that China would resume the exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong with effect from 1st July 1997. A Sino-British joint liaison group was then established to conduct the negotiations on the terms of the transfer of sovereignty. These were agreed upon and incorporated in a joint declaration signed between the United Kingdom and China in 1984. It provided that after 1997, Hong Kong would become a special administrative region of China. Under the one country, two systems concept promulgated by Chairman Deng, the socialist system and socialist policies would not be practiced in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong's previous capitalist system and lifestyle would remain unchanged for 50 years. That is until 2047. The terms of the joint declaration were enshrined in a mini-constitution known as the Basic Law. This was enacted by the National People's Congress of the Chinese government in 1990. The committee which drafted the Basic Law was headed by the former president of the Hong Kong Court of Appeal, the Honourable Mr. Justice F.S. Lee, who is a graduate of UCL. The Basic Law gave Hong Kong a high degree of autonomy with executive, legislative, and independent judicial power. Article 8 provided that the laws previously enforced in Hong Kong, including the common law and rules of equity, would be maintained. Article 81 established a Court of Final Appeal comprising 5 judges. This replaced the role of the Privy Council as the highest court of Hong Kong. Article 82 provided that judges from other common law jurisdictions may be invited to sit on this Court of Final Appeal. Accordingly, even after the handover to China, Hong Kong still has been benefiting from the legal expertise, experience, and wisdom of many eminent judges from this country and other countries which also practice the common law. I'm very honored that some of them are here tonight and thank them for their presence. The British administration had therefore left behind an invaluable legacy, the rule of law. The Beijing government was wise enough to allow this important legacy to be retained even after the handover. As a result, the transfer of administration to China in 1997 passed almost unnoticed in Hong Kong. However, Hong Kong would not enjoy full democracy. Firstly, the chief executive who rules Hong Kong would be appointed by Beijing. He would be elected by an electoral college of 1,200 members. It would be an executive-led government headed by an executive council, which alone can introduce legislation. This executive council would be the cabinet of the chief executive, and all its members would be appointed by him. As you may have heard from the news yesterday, Hong Kong has just elected a new chief executive, Mr. C.Y. Leung. There would also be an elected parliament called the Legislative Council. But this council could only approve but could not introduce legislation. In other words, it will only have the power of veto. Half of its 60 members would be elected by geographical constituencies, and the other half elected by functional constituencies. Each major industry and profession constituted one functional constituency. So Hong Kong was given a system of government which may be called a quasi-democracy. Power would be shared between the government, the rich and powerful commercial and professional sectors, and the common people. With the future of Hong Kong assured by the Joint Declaration, the government embarked upon an ambitious plan for Hong Kong's infrastructural development. This involved 9 major projects, which included the largest airport in Asia at Chek Lap Kok, 2 major highways, one going to the new airport and one to mainland China, 3 railway lines, and 3 large bridges, one of which had a span longer than the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. To facilitate these projects and to pay for them, the government planned the most extensive harbour reclamation in the world. 1,297 hectares, or just over 5 square miles, of Victoria Harbour were to be reclaimed. The extra land, which was not needed for the projects, would be sold for real estate development. It was estimated that the reclamation works would cost 200 billion Hong Kong dollars, about 18 billion pounds, and the government would reap a net profit of over 1 trillion Hong Kong dollars. That's about 85 billion pounds. Selling land for profit as a source of revenue has been for decades a fundamental economic policy of the government. As only less than half of Hong Kong people paid any tax, and the top tax rate being only about 15%, the government had to find an alternative source of revenue. It found the solution in land sales. The system works as follows. The government acquires and produces land for sale and sells the land to developers. It ensures high prices for the housing built thereon by restricting supply, and thereby also ensures high land prices. It transfers the land sales proceeds to a capital works reserve fund, and then with this fund pays for more reclamation projects to produce more land. The cycle is then repeated again and again. Over the years, through land sales, profits tax, land premiere, stamp duties, crown rents, rates, and property taxes, the government was deriving 1/3 of its total revenue directly or indirectly from land. To ensure its profitability, the government adopted a high land price policy, and property prices became the highest in the world. Unfortunately, this had a profound effect on the mindset of the government and government officials. They adopted the commercial mentality of a property-owning company instead of its role as the administration of Hong Kong, with public responsibilities to provide affordable housing and to protect the environment. The system was strongly supported by the property developers who became the richest people and owned the largest companies. As the enormous proceeds from land sales in the Capital Works Reserve Fund was only available to finance further infrastructural projects, the system was also strongly supported by powerful contractors, consultants, engineers, architects, surveyors, town planners, real estate agents, accountants, lawyers, and other professionals. The whole town planning policy became dominated by this land sales policy. Unlike any other place in the world, town planning became more concerned with money and profits than with the environment and the welfare of the people. This attitude permeated every aspect of government policy, and the government simply became a commercial enterprise. When the government ran out of land to sell, it reclaimed the harbour as a convenient source of land production. As a result, Hong Kong had lost almost half of its wonderful harbour even before the 1,297 hectares of reclamation were planned. The harbour had become only half of its original width. Reclamation was authorized by the Foreshore and Seabed Reclamations Ordinance. The ordinance was only concerned with the payment of compensation to parties affected. Under that ordinance, reclamation only needed to be approved by the Governor in Council. The reclamation did not need to comply with any criteria, nor could the public raise objections. It did not even need the approval of the Town Planning Board, which only had the power to decide on the permitted use of the land after it is formed. Therefore, there was no control over reclamation, and the government could reclaim as much as it liked. Geographically, Hong Kong is an archipelago with over 200 islands, large and small. It is in an ideal location at the center of Southeast Asia. Here we are. This is Hong Kong. It's surrounded by 12 countries of the Far East. It is situated at the mouth of the Pearl River estuary. So this is the Pearl River, and this is known as the Pearl River Delta, and this is the estuary. And Hong Kong is right here. This is Hong Kong Island, and that is Kowloon, and in between is the harbour. The harbour was originally about 7,200 hectares in area. So here we are, this is the harbour. The harbour limits, by the way, is a line across from Kowloon to Hong Kong Island on this side, eastern side, and then a line from there to here, outermost point of, western point of Hong Kong Island. So this is Victoria Harbour. Okay, so you're looking at a harbour which originally was 7,200 hectares in area. It is the best harbour in southern Asia, southern China. It can accommodate the largest vessels as its waters are 20 meters deep. It is an invaluable haven for shipping as the area suffers from fierce typhoons. So another view of the eastern harbour. Victoria Harbour lies between Kowloon on the mainland and Hong Kong Island. The city of Hong Kong grew around the harbour. It's already beginning to look like a river. But what government was proposing to do is to make it half as narrow again as now. That's what you see here. So it's also looking like a river. And this is Hong Kong Harbour at night. Beautiful. As a result of the government's new reclamation plans, Hong Kong would lose its harbour, which is its namesake. In Chinese, Hong Kong means fragrant harbour. Heng means fragrant, Gong means harbour. Instead of having one of the best and most beautiful harbours in the world, Hong Kong would end up with a channel only 800 to 1,000 meters wide, running through the center of the city. The cityscape would be completely changed. Hong Kong would become just like London, with a river running through it. Many historic and heritage features of the harbour, such as its world-famous Star Ferry Pier, Queen's Pier, and the Tamar Naval Basin would be lost. The proposed massive reclamation works would also cause tremendous environmental and ecological damage. First, dredging the harbour to remove the polluted mud and dumping the dredged material into the surrounding waters pollute the surrounding seas and reduce the sea bottom into an ecological desert. Second, dredging the huge amounts of fill from the surrounding sea bottom kills the marine life, including the famous Chinese pink dolphins. Thirdly, reducing the width of the harbour restricts the wind and tidal flow and aggravates the air and water quality. Finally, the high density of development on the reclaimed areas would increase the urban population by 750,000. This would aggravate traffic congestion and lower the quality of life for the people. In 1994, when I was a member of the Town Planning Board, my mother, C.C. Chu, complained to me about the massive reclamation works being carried out in the harbour. I asked the government to produce a comprehensive reclamation plan. It was the only one ever produced because the matter was regarded as confidential. They didn't want people to know. A paper with the plan annexed was produced to the Town Planning Board showing the 1,297 hectares of reclamation. I was completely shocked. Hong Kong was losing its harbour. By then, 661 hectares, more than half of the reclamation plan, had either been completed or committed. Too late to save this. The remaining 636 hectares were ongoing. This was produced to the Court of Final Appeal to explain the background of reclamation and the damage already done to the harbour. So this is the original harbour. Then reclamation up to 1945, up to 1967, up to 1977, up to 1985, up to 1993, up to 1994. And the proposed reclamation introduced Victoria River. This was the plan annexed to the Town Planning Board paper. The original harbour, beautiful harbour. Victoria River. See? Harbour, river. Really, really distressing. Harbour, river. This is the West Kowloon Reclamation. We couldn't save it. We couldn't save it. 340 hectares. This is the ongoing work. This is Green Island Reclamation. 2 beautiful green islands at the western entrance to the harbour would have been converted into land. So these islands would become hillocks in the center of a large piece of reclamation, 200 hectares. And a new town for 165,000 people, including public housing, will be built there. This is the Kai Tak Reclamation, or this is Kowloon Bay, a beautiful bay, or what remains of it. And this is the former airport. Would be reclaimed 300 hectares. And a new town would be put up there of 350,000 people. It's crazy town planning. And this is the central reclamation that was just completed last year. This picture was taken last year. And they were going to sell this 18 hectares of land. This is only 18 hectares. Imagine, what we are talking about is 584, which is about 35 times what you see there. This would be sold for commercial development. We're having a battle right now so that this will not be sold to the developers, but will be retained for public enjoyment as parks and open space. So the battle goes on. And this is what they wanted to do. This is Tsim Sha Tsui East Reclamation. Every bay they have, they straighten it out into one straight line. Strange town planning. The other side, the same thing. Draw a straight line across. This was originally 38 hectares. We managed to cut it down to 18. This again from here all the way to North Point would be 56 hectares. It's now being cut down to about 12 hectares. So we did some good. Oh yes, this is Kowloon Point, 40 hectares from the Tsim Sha Tsui Pier straight across to the West Kowloon Reclamation, 40 hectares. And this is the Central Reclamation, Phase 4, all the way to Wan Chai, 38 hectares. So in other words, we will have no bays left and no islands left. It will be one straight line, well, 2 straight lines on both sides, a river. Oh yes, this is the Kai Tak Reclamation, straight line from here, right across the bay to the end of the runway and then to the Yu Mun. When I reported the plan to my mother, she instructed me to stop the remaining half of the plan, which would cause the greatest damage to the harbour. We decided to launch a Save Our Harbour campaign, and the Society for Protection of the Harbour was founded. My mother actively participated in the campaign, although she was then already 80 years old. It was an intensive campaign that has lasted 18 years up to now. In the beginning, there seemed no chance of success. As the government was not elected and there was no democratic system, the government could not be voted out. The government enjoyed wide statutory powers and had the law on its side. It employed 190,000 civil servants, including close to 1,000 lawyers. It had over $1 trillion in reserves. It had the support of the rich and powerful real estate developers, as well as the commercial and professional sectors. No one would help us. Everyone said that they could not afford to offend the government. In our subsequent court cases, we had the greatest difficulty finding any expert who would testify on our behalf. The common people were apathetic, as participation in politics was not encouraged under British colonial rule. They thought that it was a waste of time and effort to oppose the government, as it had never been successfully done before. The task seemed hopeless, but we decided nevertheless to give it a try. After consulting the book, The Art of War, a 4-step strategy was devised: information, education, legislation, and litigation. The first step was to inform the public of the danger to the harbour. We cultivated the support of the news media. Hundreds of thousands of copies of the government's reclamation plan were distributed. A petition supported by over 160,000 signatures was presented to the Honourable Chris Patten as the last British governor of Hong Kong, but it received no positive response. A signature campaign was pursued, which secured over 300,000 signatures. This is the photo montage, accurate presentation of what the harbour would look like after the completion of the reclamation was presented for the campaign, and this was very, very successful. It accurately showed people what the harbour would look like, and they queued up to sign our objections. The second step was to educate the public through hundreds of articles, letters to the newspapers, speeches, conferences, meetings, forums, seminars. The public learned about the value of the harbour and the adverse environmental impact of the reclamation plans. Dozens of demonstrations were organized. Regrettably, this was not something that I was taught when I was a student in UCL. Perhaps I should have joined LSE instead. It was a unique experience to lead 20,000 people marching down the street shouting slogans. A public survey showed that our campaign had the support of over 92.6% of the public. This is what we call the Blue Ribbon Movement. We had the longest blue ribbon in the world, 2 kilometers, that stretched all the way from central Hong Kong to Wan Chai, with people linking arms in a symbolic gesture to protect the harbour. Legislation. Armed with such overwhelming public response, we won the support of all the 5 political parties. We were able to take the third step. We challenged the government to 7 debates in the Legislative Council and won all of them. 3 unanimously, with 31 votes to 0, 35 votes to 0, and 45 votes to 0. This was unprecedented. The government had never suffered such a defeat before or since. The protection of the Harbour Bill was submitted to the Legislative Council as a private member's bill by the Honourable Christine Low, who was then a legislative councillor. She became an invaluable ally and is now the chairperson of our society. Despite strong objections by the government, the bill was passed into law only 3 days before the handover to China, as one of the last legislations enacted under British rule. The Harbour Bill was not easy to draft because the offending party, which must be controlled, was the government. There was no precedent anywhere in the world. An original approach had to be invented. An original language had to be coined. As a private member's bill, the rule was that the government could not be made to incur any expenditure, and so an independent tribunal to oversee reclamation could not be set up. The Town Planning Board could not be relied on, as all its members were appointed by the government. The only solution was to give the ultimate power of control to the law courts. So the preamble of the Harbour Ordinance set out the object: to protect and preserve the harbour. Subsection 3 of the Harbour Ordinance gave the harbour the legal status of a special public asset and a natural heritage of Hong Kong people. These were words that I had to invent. You will not find it in any law books. With a clear direction that the harbour is to be protected and preserved. To achieve this purpose, the subsection created a legal presumption against reclamation, which the proponent of reclamation has to rebut. This was again a legal invention. We did a lot of research, and this is the only answer we came up with, and luckily it seemed to work. It's a very unusual use of a legal presumption. Sorry, I'm one ahead. By subsection 2, all public officers and public bodies are required to observe and to comply with subsection 1. This section is necessary because under the laws of rules of interpretation, an ordinance would not apply to the government unless it is specially spelled out. The government chose to adopt a wrong interpretation of the harbour ordinance and still proceeded with its reclamation proposals. It was advised that all they needed to do was to look at the ordinance, consider it, and then ignore it. It ignored our repeated remonstrations. Despite the harbour ordinance, the government still gazetted 584 hectares, 2 square miles, of new reclamations under the Foreshore and Seabed Reclamations Ordinance and proceeded with the reclamation work. If you compare this plan with the one I submitted earlier, you'll find that it is almost identical. So the law was simply ignored. We instituted the, This forced us to take the 4th step, that is, to enforce the harbour ordinance through litigation. Over the years, we have taken the government to court 7 times. We instituted the first judicial review in 2002 and succeeded in obtaining from the High Court a correct interpretation of the harbour ordinance and in stopping the reclamation plan. The government was furious and appealed to the Court of Final Appeal, which unanimously decided in our favour in a landmark judgment. The Court of Final Appeal made the following pronouncements. The harbour is undoubtedly a central part of Hong Kong's identity. It is the heart of the metropolis and something extraordinary to be transmitted from generation to generation. Reclamation that had already taken place renders what remains of the harbour even more precious and makes the need to protect and preserve it more important and compelling. The legislative intention of the harbour ordinance was to accord to the harbour a unique legal status. There was a great public need to protect and preserve it in its present state. The burden to rebut the presumption is therefore a heavy one. The presumption could only be rebutted by establishing an overriding public need for reclamation. Such need must be of greater public importance than the importance of the harbour. The reclamation must be the minimum, and there must be no reasonable alternative. The need must be supported by cogent and convincing materials. In a separate judgment, the Court of Final Appeal upheld the decision of the High Court in awarding indemnity costs to a harbour society as the successful applicant. This established a new legal principle. Hitherto, the decided cases allowed an award of indemnity costs only to cases brought with an ulterior motive for an improper purpose or where there was some deception or underhand conduct on the part of the losing party. The Court of Final Appeal pronounced that indemnity costs was not confined to such cases. However, the grounds for making such an order must be connected with the case and might extend to any matter relating to the litigation, including the attributes and conduct of the parties, the character of the proceedings, and the circumstances leading to the litigation. In our case, the Court of Final Appeal found that in making the award, the judge's discretion was correctly exercised. The judge had rightly taken into account the fact that the proceedings were commenced to protect a public asset rather than to assert a private right. The manifest public importance of the case, our society's limited finances, which were dependent on public donations, and that the proceedings had resulted in the resolution of fundamental legal issues. The Court of Final Appeal judgment freed the restriction on the award of indemnity costs imposed by the then existing legal authorities and extended the principle to public interest litigations such as our case. The judgment is the decision of the highest court of the land, being equivalent in status to the House of Lords in England. This important new legal precedent has persuasive authority within the common law jurisdiction. The clear judicial pronouncement by the court that individuals and charities undertaking meritorious litigation in the public interest will receive special consideration as regards the award of court costs has a very major social impact. Litigation to assert public rights is difficult and expensive. While governments have immense financial resources, litigants usually do not. Where only the usual party and party costs are awarded, the successful litigant can never recover the full amount it has spent and will still suffer a serious financial loss. So unless the litigant knows that in the event of success, it could recover all its costs as a result of an indemnity costs award, or if it is unsuccessful, it will not be additionally burdened with substantial payments and costs, the litigant will often be deterred from challenging the government in court. By removing the disincentive of such financial burden and risk, individuals and charities would be encouraged to take governments to court over abuses of power and neglect of public duties. Thus, this legal precedent, which established a new ground for an award of indemnity costs, has general significance in support of the rule of law. Despite the Court of Final Appeal judgment, the government would not give up. It still proceeded with the reclamation plan, claiming that the reclamation was only temporary and therefore not covered by the Haboour ordinance. They would try anything. We had to institute another judicial review, which we again won. In that case, the High Court pronounced that the intention of the legislature was clear. The harbour was to be protected from any and all reclamation works, and no distinction should be drawn between permanent and temporary reclamation. Again, costs were awarded to us on an indemnity basis. As a result, I had the pleasure of collecting almost $10 million from the government. This offset part of our costs in running the campaign, which has been substantial. As a result of the court decisions, the harbour is now protected by the protection of the Harbour Ordinance and the Court of Final Appeal judgment, as well as by the High Court judgment on temporary reclamation. The people are now committed to public issues. They have now discovered the political and legal powers. Since the unprecedented successes of our judicial reviews, over 100 community groups have been formed, and hundreds of judicial reviews have been instituted by the public over urban planning and environmental issues. 95% of the proposed 584 hectares of reclamation have been stopped. The government had to abandon the Green Island reclamation, the Kowloon Bay reclamation, and the Chin Wan Bay reclamation. Only 5%, about 30 hectares, are now proceedings. Such reclamation is needed for the construction of a 6-lane central Wanzhai bypass, which runs along the northern shore of Hong Kong Island under the harbour. This underground railway has our support, as it is needed to relieve the traffic congestion of the central urban areas. The government has officially committed to the community that there will not be any more reclamation projects. Instead of being merely a convenient source of land supply, the unique value of the harbour is now widely appreciated. The attention of the government and all sectors of the Hong Kong community is now focused on the harbour and harbourfront and how to put them to good use. The government has changed its approach to town planning, which is no longer dominated by profits from land sales. The urban planning process is no longer top-down, but bottom-up. Plans are no longer decided at the top and then imposed on the public. The people are now consulted on every major project at its inception, and their views are taken into account in coming to a decision. In the 2008 policy address, after our victory in the last High Court case, the Chief Executive acknowledged the harbour to be an icon of Hong Kong and should be cherished as a precious asset. He committed to the vision that our beautiful harbour will remain a symbol of our city that can be enjoyed by all. The Town Planning Board has promulgated a vision statement for Victoria Harbour, which affirms the need to protect and preserve the harbour and to enhance its environmental value. A set of harbour planning principles have been prepared by the Harbourfront Enhancement Committee, appointed by the government, which commits to the enhancement of the harbour and harbourfront, such that they will become an attractive, vibrant, accessible, sustainable, world-class asset, and a harbour for the people, a harbour of life. The government has also established the Harbourfront Commission, on which I am serving. Currently, litigation is being drafted to convert this Harbourfront Commission into a statutory harbourfront authority to look after the planning of the harbour and harbourfront. When this authority is formed, the harbour will hopefully be safe, and my work for the harbour will come to an end. Our society had cooperated with the HSBC in Hong Kong and founded the Harbour Business Forum, which now includes 108 of the largest and the most powerful business groups and organizations. With their vast financial resources, important studies on how to make better use of the harbour and harbourfront have been commissioned. Leisure uses are being planned, such as boating, swimming, sailing, fishing, as well as venues and facilities for harbour activities like firework displays for festive occasions like Chinese New Year. New marinas, parks, promenades, a new world-class cruise terminal, and a maritime museum are being built. The water is also being cleaned up. For years, the harbour was used as the largest toilet bowl in the world. Human waste from over 4 million people was discharged untreated into the harbour. The traditional annual cross-harbour swim from Hong Kong Island to Kowloon had to be suspended in 1972 for health and hygienic reasons. For the first time in 4 decades, the cross-harbour swim was held again last year, as the water is now safe for swimming. The whole harbour and harbourfront are now being transformed into what will in the future be one of the best harbour environments in the world. A healthy society stands firmly on 2 feet, a system of democracy and the rule of law. Before a system of democracy is in place, the rule of law can be extremely useful. Access to the law courts through the judicial review process gives the common people a channel to voice their grievances against any injustice or abuse of power by the government and government officials. It can be a safety valve for the people to let off steam so that their pent-up anger will not explode into violence in the streets. Hong Kong has always been China's window to the world and has, in recent decades, been a catalyst in helping to bring China into the modern brotherhood of nations. China is still developing its own system of democracy and the rule of law suitable for the Chinese culture. Perhaps our recent experience in Hong Kong in developing the remedy of judicial review could further help China find a way forward. China may find the judicial review process to be useful and constructive in its development of the rule of law. From my experience conducting the Save Our Harbour campaign over the past 18 years, may I offer this advice to the younger members of this audience. When you undertake an important and difficult task, you must cultivate the following qualities: a pure heart, so that you can act with conscience; a clear head for incisive thinking; good eyes for far-sighted vision; sharp ears to listen to sound advice; broad shoulders to bear the heavy burden of responsibility; strong legs so that you can last the distance; and finally, guts so that you will have the courage to face up to the challenge. The important lesson that can be learned from the Hong Kong experience is that where huge profits are to be made, there is always the danger of collusion between the government and large corporations at the expense of damage to the environment. Constant vigilance is needed. Where protection of the environment is concerned, do not look over your shoulders for someone else to come forward. There is only you. Saving Hong Kong's Victoria Harbour or rather, quoting the Court of Final Appeal, what remains of the harbour is the most memorable experience of my life. I dedicate the success to my late mother and to a great man who was a great lawyer, educationist, and in whose honor this magnificent lecture theatre is named, my former teacher at UCL, the late Professor Dennis Holland. Any success I have achieved, I owe to his teachings which have guided me throughout my professional life. No doubt the hundreds and thousands of his other students feel the same. To him, I am deeply grateful. Finally, may I say how honored I am by your gracious presence here tonight. Thank you.